The Seattle Sounders and LAFC meet again in the MLS Cup playoffs, but this could be the most important fixture in this matchup's history, as I think one of these two teams will make the MLS Cup final. From LAFC having fond memories of getting their first win at home against the Sounders, to the Sounders never losing to them in the playoffs, crushing all LAFC fans' hearts in the postseason. There's a lot to discuss going into this match, so I brought in someone that was a part of the fabric of LAFC from the beginning. Max Bretos was the voice of LAFC for 4 years from 2018 to 2022 and is now one of the announcers for MLS's broadcast on Apple TV. Max will be joining us to preview the Seattle Sounders versus LAFC match in the MLS Cup playoffs. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So Max, first and foremost, welcome on. Really happy to have you here. And I mean, I've already kind of spoken about it a little bit in the intro, but you're someone that has been a big part of MLS since the beginning. I mean, you've commentated like a plethora of big games in MLS. I mean, that includes even the Sounders, some of those US Open Cup finals from us early on. And then you became the main voice for LAFC when they came into the league back in 2018 and has been a part of the fabric of the club up to this point. And now you're one of the guys, you're part of the team for Apple TV. And so you're someone that has commentated, has watched with very close detail these matches between LAFC and the Sounders. I'm not counting it. I'm not calling it a rivalry because I don't think it is, but this very heated matchup between these two teams since 2018. I mean, there has been some big matches where LAFC have had their first ever win in Seattle, their first ever home win against Seattle, but then Seattle always has their number in the playoffs. Talk to me a little bit about this matchup between these two teams, and now they're meeting again for the third time in the playoffs this year.
Well, you're saying that I'm the right guest for this, since as you mapped out, I got a Sounders connection. I called all three of their games in the playoffs thus far, and obviously my connection to LAFC. So you got the right guy, Sean. Okay, you got the right guy for this. This is as the playoffs are rolling, and this is such a young league. And as you've seen in any sport, getting a good matchup, like if it's baseball, if you get Yankees, Red Sox, or Cowboys, Eagles, whatever it is, if you see that in the postseason, it adds a layer because, especially for MLS, which is such a regional league, but it wants to be a national league, it has to get games that people that are not Sounder fans or LAFC fans would be interested in watching. This is one of them because, whether it may not be a rivalry or not, because of the things that you mentioned, obviously from an LAFC perspective, being able to get their first win and their first home win. But the two playoff games in particular, it's really all about that 2019 playoff game. And, that's such a unique circumstance because that was the best season in MLS history at the time. And the Sounders came to BMO Stadium and ended it. So that's something that LAFC remembers. And while LAFC had the target on their back then, Seattle certainly has, especially up in Lumen Field. So it's an incredible opportunity for LAFC, and whether they just want to repeat MLS Cup. Seattle wants to lift another MLS Cup, but this is without getting into the details, this is massive for the two clubs. It will help build it towards a rivalry, depending on how the game goes. From an LAFC perspective, I think it's huge because while you want to play your playoff games at home, they haven't had a chance to build a road playoff pedigree, and what a chance to do it here. So there's so much at stake, not even to mention, the form of these two clubs, which has been really good here. That's why they're in these two spots. The fact that the winner will host the Western Final, there's a lot attached to it, which just makes it the biggest playoff matchup in these postseasons. A lot of people are calling it like another MLS Cup. All due respect to the teams in the East that had better records, but this kind of feels that way. And it really is one of the bigger MLS playoff matchups in recent memory, to be honest.
I want to throw out a couple of stats, going into this game. If it plays any part in, what you're thinking is going to happen in this game. As I mentioned early on, LAFC have fond memories at CenturyLink Lumen Field, as it used to be called back then. First ever win was there. Seattle was the first team that they beat at home at the time called Bank of California Stadium. Then Seattle stunk up the party in 2019 in the playoffs, stunk up the party in 2020 in the playoffs. Seattle were the first team to win the CONCACAF Champions League, and LAFC was like, wait, if they can do it, we can do it too. But unfortunately fell a little bit short. And it's not to throw any shade whatsoever. I feel like there was a little bit in that. I think there was something where LAFC was like, okay, if Seattle can do it, we can do it and we can do it better, which I think they almost did. And I think they were a little bit unlucky they weren't able to. But nonetheless, for the past 2 seasons, I'd say actually, I feel like this heated matchup has dried up a little bit with Seattle not having being able to beat LAFC since 2021, which I believe, funnily enough, was a game we watched together at Lumen Field. And Seattle hasn't been able to score on LAFC in a year. So it's been 2 years since Seattle's been able to beat LAFC. It's been a year since they've scored against LAFC. But then again, LAFC has never been able to beat Seattle in the playoffs. But at some point, we all know this in the sport. Records are meant to be broken. They will be broken. In this situation, I mean, do any of these factors play a part in this game?
Most people will believe this. I mean, when you look at these matchups, they haven't been these goal fests or the hold your seats white knuckle affairs. They've been pretty regular. I mean, it's been pretty intense, defensive oriented. Even going back, even historically, I mean, the playoff game in 2019 was the outlier, but really LAFC held on in that opening game in 2018 in both opening games, home and away. And then in these past games, you kind of know it. And I think most people anticipate it's going to be something like that. The potential for it to get open is there. But even there, even when they're not playing each other, Seattle have been so economical, don't give up goals. I mean, that game against Dallas, the last game, they just squeezed them out. And LAFC have gotten much better defensively. Very good in transition. So it feels kind of like a chess match. So I think to answer your question, the games that we have seen kind of painted the picture. It'd be crazy if you said if I told you it was going to be 4-3, it might, but it would be insane to suggest such a thing because of everything we've seen up till now. But I think it's going to test Seattle if they feel like they have to score goals at LAFC and they feel like they can't break through. That could be a benefit to the visitors ahead of this game. Because it's very real. So I think you'd be naive not to really bring into play the history of recent and in the past of how these games have gone and say that it's going to be in the coaches and players' heads because they feel like they know what to expect, but they've got to be aware of the unexpected. But I mean, I think I'm expecting I'll be up there in Seattle and I will expect, a grinded out affair. We'll see how it plays out, though. But I think most people who have seen these two teams play would expect a similar game.
I think the playoffs could be like a good opportunity as like that reset to see, you have a clean slate. It's no more of this best of 3 series, which I personally don't like, and many other fans don't like either, but some do. But we're back to the format that most people like. Even Brian Schmetzer has come out and said, I like single elimination. That's how I like it done. And it's a clean slate and an opportunity against a team that Sounders have never lost against in the playoffs. And I'm kind of curious for you, would this put a big damper on their season if they lose at home to LAFC? Would that not necessarily alarm the alarm bells, but like be like, oh, that leaves a really sour taste in how things could have ended, especially for players like Nico, who this could be his final farewell game in Seattle. And, as much as he has been, up and down for the past, like, I want to say like season and a half, he's really turned it on as that luxury piece. I like that term. He's really turned it on. So he wants to leave on a high, which shows the respect that he has for the fans, for the club, for Brian, that, I know I'm playing basically for nothing. Like, I'm not getting anything out of this because I'm not playing for a contract renewal. I'm just playing to, show my respect, show that, how much I love this team and I want to leave this team on a high. But would it be a damper, let's say, if Seattle loses this game and LAFC go on and maybe have an MLS Cup final, another MLS Cup final appearance back-to-back years?
Well, obviously, losing to LAFC and losing at home would be a bitter pill to swallow for the Sounders. And in all likelihood, and I don't know anything, I'm just based on what I've seen, probably the end of Nico Lodeiro and perhaps the Raúl Ruidíaz era in Seattle. So it's a pretty seismic matchup. Everyone wants to keep things going, especially playing as well as you have. So, but it will create a very interesting offseason. It's going to be an interesting offseason for Seattle, while it's not going to be these wholesale changes like we might see at Toronto FC or New York City FC or the LA Galaxy. I would put them at the top of the list because of if the comings and goings that we pointed out, they're going to have to bring in, they'll have DP space. Not that they are the biggest external DP pursuer, But I think they've had a good track record. Maybe it's another good South American talent where they've had incredible success with guys like Lodeiro and Ruidíaz and Leo Chu. So it's obviously don't want to think about that, but it is a situation where you've got yourself in this position and you want to take advantage of it. Because look, this is a notwithstanding the history of the Seattle Sounders, the fact that whether it's what any sports book would tell you, the winner of this game is going to be the favorite to head to MLS Cup. So, not to mention the club would love to have another home game. LAFC would love to have another home game. That's obviously a windfall for the club, and it'd be disappointing for a lot of reasons. But I think more than anything, it would be not a seismic change for the Sounders, but the Sounders will look a little bit different in 2024.
Then looking into this game, I mean, we've talked about it, the history of these two teams. I mean, statistically, LAFC, when you look at this game, I think whoever is the team that scores first is going to be the team that's going to be in pole position because LAFC this season are a team. I don't know the stat exactly off the top of my head.
If somebody scores first.
That's a good point. If somebody does score first, we could see a
Somebody will.
Could be a thrilling 0-0 draw and goes to penalties. We don't know. But whoever does score first, with LAFC especially, when they score first, I think they've only, in like 20 matches, they've only lost like 3 games when they score first, something like that. Just like they don't lose when they score first, pretty much 90% of the time. And with Seattle, I think the same can be said for them. I don't know the exact stat for Seattle.
No, I think it's very similar. They take the lead, they hang on to it.
And goals have been the thing is, but you would favor LAFC in the goal scoring department because of one certain man. But for LAFC, they got to feel that there could be a little bit of an advantage for them with, I mean, having just that X factor in Bouanga, I think could fill them with more confidence, even though, and I even think Vela, depending on will he start, will he not start, the turf thing, doesn't want to play on turf, X, Y, and Z. They still do have those players that have still been pretty good for them as well. But granted, same thing could be said for Seattle.
LAFC has an advantage in what they can throw to the Sounders. I think LAFC are probably sitting there going, it's going to be the same 11 that played against FC Dallas. The one exception, maybe Nico Lodeiro comes in. I get the feeling Lodeiro will start this game. I have no information. I just get the feeling that somehow
Your
this
Spidey
is a game.
senses.
Yeah, I just feel like it. And that's a big jump. I know we heard Brian Schmetzer's mention that he considered playing Nico Lodeiro, and he said in hindsight, maybe I should have started him in the second game against Dallas. Maybe this is another spot, but that's the only wrinkle I think the Sounders could throw at LAFC. LAFC is very different. They could go with, there's 3 center backs. It could be Chiellini and Murillo. It could be Murillo and Long. It could be Long and Chiellini. So that's one thing they kind of have to guess what's going on. The midfield has been switched around. They had Ilie Sanchez and Matty Bogusz and Timothy Tillman, and then they brought in Kellen Acosta, who came in and pushed Tillman up, and that was a big part of why LAFC had success against the Whitecaps in that second leg. So that's a wrinkle they have. And then the Carlos Vela situation, who didn't start in that second game, and then you could have Bouanga and Christian Oliveira, who are going to be, that's pretty fair to say it, but maybe Carlos Vela is a super sub. Maybe Mario Gonzalez gets another start. It just seems like LAFC are a little bit more of an unknown based on what we've seen the last few weeks. And I think Steve Cherundolo's thrilled to have that in his back pocket because maybe it gives that team an edge. It was a risky situation, too, because LAFC had a lot of guys on international duty, and they all played except for Maxime Crépeau, and they are all coming back. It looks fit, knock on wood for LAFC's sake, but it looks like they're going to do it, but they haven't been training with the team. So that could be an advantage for the Sounders that they have been together as well. There's a lot of factors in this that will probably determine which way it goes. I will say about it being a scoreless, drab affair, I would tend to think it could be there, but the way this is, it's going to be a really tactically engaging game, bit of a chess match. Seattle has a lot of possession. Will Seattle be content, or they invite LAFC to get the ball? Like, it's one of the things, you take the ball. I think transition will be a big part. But if that happens, it could open up the game. And I mean, I would be a little surprised, not massively surprised, if all of a sudden we're at half and we have 2-3 goals and this game's opened up. It's possible. And that's what makes it, again, I'm so excited for it, because there's a lot of knowns, but there's a lot of unknowns. And something, I think the mystery will help one team or the other.